Naimi Roshan. I'm an accredited family law specialist and one of the directors of CE Family Law. Kate is one of the founding directors of Marshall White in Bayside. She has over 16 years of experience in the real estate industry. She's also been through a separation herself, so she can empathise with individuals who have also gone through a separation. I'm very lucky to have Kate with me. Today we're going to focus on some questions and answers. I'm going to ask Kate some questions about the real estate industry and hopefully she'll be able to share her knowledge with us. Thank you. The first question. Kate, what are the trends you are seeing in the local real estate market?
So at the moment, I think if people are tuning into the media and watching the news, there's a lot of doom and gloom out there. I think one of the pieces of advice I would have for people is to not watch the news too intently and use it to make your decisions. Make sure that when you're looking at the general, journalism and feel around the market, that you're looking specifically at one of the suburbs that you live in. So where they might be saying that, there's a 50% auction clearance rate in Victoria, that may be 75% in the Bayside suburbs. And we're sitting around 60 to 70% at the moment. And a lot of those auctions that don't sell on a Saturday may sell within a week after. So we're finding the market actually really positive towards the end of 2024, then hoping 2025 will continue on that trend.
Kate, if you're considering separating or you've already separated, from a real estate perspective, what advice would you give clients?
I think first things first is you need to get yourself obviously into a headspace where you're thinking straight. And, I've been through it myself and I know that that's not always easy. Emotions are there, fears take over. And there's a lot of experts that will come at you and try to give you advice. One of the first things I would say is you need to get expert advice from a professional. So when you decide that it is time to maybe be looking at breaking up assets, including a real estate portfolio, I would connect in, first of all, with an agent that you trust, and you can have a confidential discussion around your thoughts and feelings towards maybe wanting to sell. From that point of view, you could always have a curbside appraisal just to understand broadly maybe what you're worth, what your asset's worth. At that point, you don't need somebody to be coming into your property. You may just say, I live at number 1 Smith Street in Brighton. I would just like to understand where the approximate value sits. And that can just arm you with some knowledge at the beginning before you really make any sort of decisions, and perhaps before you even confront your other half to discuss the future and what you want to do.
That's an excellent point, because from a family law perspective, one of the early questions I ask a client is if they can give me a schedule of what their assets and liabilities are and if they can estimate a value. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the time they say, oh, I don't know what the family home is worth. So that's where you would come into the picture and provide insight and give an estimate on what it's likely to be valued at. Is that correct?
Yep. Yeah. I think that's the first step in the process. As I said, it can be done from afar, but you could also have somebody come through. That can also be done confidentially. And you just make that clear with your real estate professional at the beginning that you don't want them speaking to anyone about this, that you really would like to keep it private. We can go through the property, we can give them an analysis, use comparable data and sales to tell them whereabouts they sit. And then they may be taking that information back to their legal representative or their accountant or financial planner or whatever it is. But the key is arm yourself with the knowledge first.
It's also important, something that you raised earlier, when they get an idea as to what their property's worth, they'll also know what the fees and commissions are likely to be. And from a family law perspective, we can take that on as a liability. So both parties, if they're planning on selling that property, they can say, well, this is also a liability that should be taken into account. So it's not borne by one party, it's borne by both of them.
Correct. And there are costs associated with selling. And so you need to understand what the home's worth or the investment properties and, get the portfolio analysed. And then also understand what the costs are associated with selling. So how to market the property, the costs of commissions. And then also you go into the next step, which we can talk about, which is how you do it and when you do it.
Kate, I have clients asking me, when is the best time to sell their property if they're planning on selling, or once they've had a financial settlement, how do they get back into the market? They may have to downside. What is the process, and what advice would you give?
So I'd always say the best time to sell is when you're ready to sell. If I had a crystal ball for the best month of the year or the best weekend of the year that you should go to auction or, private sell your property, we'd all just buy and sell for a living. So, you can make some form of estimation. Obviously, you don't want to sell a property that's in a location of private schools around school holiday periods when people are away. So there's some really basic rules that we use for timing, but for the most part, it's when you're ready and when your property is then ready to go to market or to have buyers through, to make sure that it's presented to the best of its ability and you can maximise the price.
So if you've had a settlement, so say parties have finalised their financial settlement and one of them has come up, or both of them have liquid cash, when is it appropriate, and what would your advice be in relation to purchasing another property? Maybe they can't.
Yep. So same thing. I think at that point, that's when I would say bring in your professional team that you're working with, because there are a lot of situations through divorce and separation where people go on and rent, and they decide that perhaps renting for 1 to 2 years is a good idea because they might be moving suburbs. They may want to try before they buy in a certain form of property. If they've come from a house and they're going to a townhouse, maybe best before you contribute stamp duty to the government and expend all of your liquidity, that you may choose to rent. So we can guide, even though I'm on a selling side, we also have a property management rental team, so we can sit down and analyse which is the best way to go. But I think from that, it's really your financial plan that will decipher how much you have to spend, how much you want to invest into a property. Are you buying a home, and can you do an investment property as well? Do you want to diversify across homes and shares? So there are all those sorts of things I can't guide on how to build wealth holistically, but certainly once they come to me and say, I've got X amount of dollars, we'd like to live in these suburbs and this sort of property, then I can go about finding them a home and helping them through the journey.
Well, this is where the group of experts come in, because by then they should have an accountant that would be able to advise them, a financial planner that can be of assistance, and then they've got their estate agent that can guide them through the process as well.
Correct. So build that team of professionals from the beginning. And I think always start with the end in mind as well, of how you want it to look for your family and how settled looks down the track. And then we can all work together from there. And I think if you build that team, then you feel really supported and you can make decisions you're sure about.
Kate, when I'm drafting settlement documents, one of the provisions when parties have agreed to sell a property is the method of sale. And at times, orders can say that whatever the selling agent recommends. Can you take us through that method and the process?
So there are variations to how you'll sell your property. There could be an off-market sale where buyers come through without even marketing a home. So it's a bit of a secret. No one knows. There's no board. There's no advertising. There can also be auction, as we all know, private sale, expressions of interest, which has become a little bit more trendy in 2023, 24 and going forward. So we would often use the method of sale to suit the home, but also to suit the client and their circumstances. So we may even do a combination of the two. We may suggest a 2-stage approach, which is let's get buyers through originally without a big investment in funds to advertise or promote the home. See if there's a buyer that is prepared to pay the price that you would like to achieve for the property. If not, we can then go into a more public market campaign where we do an auction, private sale, or expressions of interest. But, it's a bespoke program. It's not a one-size-fits-all, like everything.
Exactly.
It will be based on the circumstance of the seller. Sometimes a deceased estate or a separation like this, an auction can be the most transparent way to sell. Then there's no argument as to a certain buyer was chosen over another or, a timeline for one or the other. It's more just we go to auction and we get the best price. That can be most common in a family law situation, but we will tailor it to the client and their property. Sanaz, can we talk about a certain scenario where we may have sold a property in the past for clients who are going through a separation? And when it comes time for the deposit to be released, and even bigger than that, the full settlements of monies, there's no clear directive on where that money's to go, or perhaps it goes to the person who's on title when there's actually another owner of the property, but all the money goes off to them. That's something that can be really messy and horrendous for somebody, I would have thought. This is where you come into play. And if there's someone like you in their corner, then the real estate company can act on that directive.
Correct. So if parties reach an agreement, they need to formalise it. So there needs to be either a consent order or a financial agreement drafted, which has that plan. Mm-hmm. Property sales, what happens to the deposit, what happens to the proceeds of sale. If there is no agreement, then the funds should be kept in trust. It can be either solicitors' trust accounts. So clients need to be candid with their lawyers or their advisors and speak to them about what their intentions are, and also come up with some form of a plan as to what's to happen with these funds, in particular if there's not an end result yet. So a property may go on the market, it may be sold before the parties reach an agreement. Then the question is, well, what happens to the deposit?
Yeah.
What happens to the proceeds of sale? And solicitors amongst the other solicitors can discuss these matters and come up with some form of a resolution. And we can advise the agent, and I do on a regular basis, saying, please keep the deposit in your trust account until the parties agree otherwise, or release the deposit to the parties so we can have some form of a plan moving forward. Kate, if you were going to advise our listeners about 3 points that they should take home with them, what would they be?
So I think the discussion's been great today, Sanaz. Thank you. I think the first thing would be, before you do anything, you build your professional team around you. In this marital situation, I would obviously say a family lawyer would be first point of call to give you the guidance. You need an accountant, a financial planner, and obviously a real estate professional that's going to guide you. So that, what I call a pit crew is your number one point. So you're armed with information. Second is obviously have your assets and liabilities valued. So understand what you're worth, your property that you live in, principal place of residence, investment properties, or anything else you've got, self-managed super properties. Get the information as to what everything's worth so you know your values you're working with. And the third point is have a roadmap and a plan. So once you understand who's guiding you and what things are worth, then you can really map out, when am I going to be either selling things, renting things out, or moving on from these assets? Who's going to be doing it for me, and how am I going to do it? And then the goals and objectives for once it's all finalised. When I've got an amount of money, how do I want my life then to look? I think if you have those 3 things in place, then females or males will feel empowered to make the right decisions and move on to the next chapter of their lives, with as much security and fulfillment as possible in this hard time.
It has been a pleasure, Kate. Thank you. And hopefully we'll do this again next time.
I look forward to it.